Blood-stained snow crunched beneath Wade Tucker's worn boots as he trudged through the mountain pass. The howling January wind of 1873 cutting through his sheepskin coat like it was made of paper, when a muffled cry, almost human but too faint to be certain, stopped him dead in his tracks. The 28-year-old cowboy had been tracking a wounded elk for nearly 2 days, desperate to bring meat back to his isolated homestead before the worst of winter settled in. What he found instead would change the course of his solitary life forever. Wade raised his gloved hand to shield his eyes from the blinding white, scanning the landscape for the source of the sound. There, partially hidden by a snowdrift against a rocky outcropping, lay what appeared to be nothing more than a dark bundle. Another cry, this one unmistakably that of an infant carried on the wind. Wade's heart hammered in his chest as he abandoned all thoughts of his hunt and rushed forward, sinking knee-deep with each desperate step. "Hello." He called out, his voice instantly swallowed by the vastness of the Wyoming wilderness. "Anybody there?" As he approached, the dark bundle took shape a woman, nearly blue with cold, curled protectively around a small package wrapped in blankets. Her eyes fluttered open at his approach, revealing irises the color of summer cornflowers, stark against her snow-pale face. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. "My baby." Wade knelt beside her, quickly assessing the situation. The woman's dress was thin, entirely inappropriate for the bitter mountain cold, and stained with what appeared to be blood at her side. She clutched the bundle to her chest with what little strength remained in her frozen limbs. "Madam, I need to get you both someplace warm," Wade said, already shrugging off his coat to wrap around her shoulders. "My cabin's half a day's ride from here." The woman's eyes grew wide with fear. "I can't." They might," she broke off in a fit of coughing. "There's no one else for miles," Wade assured her, though he couldn't help glancing over his shoulder. Who was she running from? "Can you stand?" She tried to push herself up but collapsed back into the snow with a pained gasp. The bundle in her arms squirmed and let out another cry. "May I?" Wade asked, gesturing to the baby. After a moment's hesitation, the woman nodded, though her fingers tightened around the blankets. Wade gently pried the bundle from her grasp and folded back the edge of the cloth to reveal a tiny red face, a baby girl, no more than a few months old, miraculously warm despite the circumstances. "I'll carry her, I promise," Wade said, tucking the infant securely inside his shirt against his chest. "But I need to get you up on my horse." With careful movements, Wade helped the woman to her feet. She swayed dangerously and he caught her against his side. "What's your name, madam?" he asked, partly to keep her conscious as he guided her toward where his horse, Drifter, waited patiently beneath a stand of pines. "Josephine," she whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. "Josephine Wells, the baby is Lily." "Wade Tucker," he responded, supporting most of her weight as they trudged through the snow. "Pleased to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." A ghost of a smile crossed Josephine's blue-tinged lips. "Believe me, Mr. Tucker, so do I." Getting Josephine onto his horse proved challenging. She was weakened from exposure, and what Wade now suspected was a gunshot wound to her side, though he didn't press for details. The baby fussed inside his shirt, tiny hands pressed against his bare skin, seeking warmth. "I'll hand Lily up to you once you're settled," Wade said, intertwining his fingers to form a step for Josephine's foot. She hesitated. "I don't know if I can hold her. I can't feel my hands anymore." The admission seemed to cost her dearly. Wade could see the fear and shame in her eyes. A mother unable to hold her own child. "Then I'll keep her right where she is for now," Wade promised. "But we need to move quickly. Storm's coming in." Indeed, the sky behind them had turned an ominous steel gray, promising more snow before nightfall. With a Herculean effort, Wade managed to get Josephine mounted on Drifter. He removed his bandana, wrapped it around her hands, and secured the reins between her stiff fingers. Then, with the baby still nestled against his chest, he took the horse's lead and began trudging through the snow, pulling them toward safety. The journey back to Wade's cabin was arduous. The snow fell heavier with each passing hour, and Wade had to stop frequently to check on Josephine, who drifted in and out of consciousness. The baby, remarkably, remained quiet most of the time, as though she understood the gravity of their situation. "Stay with me, Josephine," Wade called up to her whenever her head would loll dangerously forward. "Tell me about Lily. How old is she?" 4 months, Josephine murmured, rousing herself. "Born in September." "She's a strong one," Wade commented, feeling the baby's tiny heartbeat against his chest. "Takes after her mama, I reckon." Josephine made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I hope not. I've made nothing but mistakes." Wade didn't press for more. Everyone in the West had a past they were running from, himself included. The Tuckers had once been respected cattle ranchers in Texas until the war changed everything. Now, all that remained of his family's legacy was the small parcel of land he'd claimed in the Wyoming territory, far from the ghosts that haunted him. By the time they crested the final ridge, revealing the small valley where Wade's cabin stood, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the pristine snow. Smoke still curled from the chimney, a blessing, as it meant the fire he'd banked that morning hadn't died out completely. "Almost there," Wade encouraged, noticing how Josephine struggled to remain upright. His cabin was modest, a single room with a small lean-to addition that served as a stable for Drifter. Built of sturdy logs chinked with mud and moss, it offered protection from the elements but little in the way of comfort. Still, at that moment, it might as well have been a palace. Wade helped Josephine dismount, catching her as her legs buckled beneath her. The baby began to fuss as they entered the cabin, perhaps sensing the change in temperature. The interior was sparse: a narrow bed against one wall, a table with a single chair, a stone fireplace, and various hunting implements hanging from pegs. A coffee pot sat on the hearth, and a Dutch oven was suspended above the coals. "Let's get you by the fire," Wade said, guiding Josephine to his only chair. He quickly stoked the embers, adding kindling until flames licked at the fresh logs. The baby's cries grew more insistent. "She's hungry," Josephine said weakly. "I haven't been able to feed her properly since yesterday." Wade nodded, the gravity of their situation sinking in. He'd come across people in dire straits before the frontier was unforgiving, but never a mother and infant. And never in the dead of winter. "I have some goat's milk," he offered, "from my neighbor's place. It's a few days old, but it should do in a pinch." Josephine nodded gratefully, reaching for her child. Wade carefully extracted Lily from his shirt and placed her in her mother's arms. The infant's face was scrunched and red, her tiny fists waving in protest at her empty stomach. While Wade warmed the milk and found a clean cloth that could serve as a makeshift bottle, he kept glancing at Josephine. Her coat had fallen open, revealing the extent of her injury, a crude bandage tied around her waist, stained dark with dried blood. "That needs tending," Wade said, nodding toward her side. Josephine followed his gaze and quickly pulled her coat closed. "It's nothing." "Begging your pardon, madam, but that's not nothing, is it? Was it a bullet?" Her silence was answer enough. "I won't ask who or why," Wade said, returning with the warmed milk. "But if that wound festers, Lily, there is going to be without a mother." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes. "Perhaps that would be for the best." "No child is better off motherless," Wade replied firmly, remembering how his own mother had died of fever when he was just 12. "Now, let me see to that wound, and then you can rest. You're safe here." Something in his steady gaze must have convinced her, for Josephine nodded slowly. "After I feed Lily." Together, they managed to get the infant to suckle milk from the cloth, though it was a messy affair. Once Lily's hunger was satisfied, she drifted off to sleep, her little face relaxed and innocent. "I'll make a place for her to sleep," Wade said, gathering some furs and arranging them in a small wooden crate he used for storing potatoes. It wasn't ideal, but it would keep the baby warm and secure for the night. With Lily settled, Wade turned his attention to Josephine's wound. It wasn't pretty. The bullet had grazed her side, tearing a nasty furrow through her flesh, but it wasn't as deep as he'd feared. Using water he'd melted from snow and the small supply of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes, Wade cleaned the injury as gently as he could. "You've done this before." Josephine observed, gritting her teeth against the pain. Had my share of scrapes, Wade admitted, applying a poultice of herbs he'd learned to use from an old Shoshone woman who lived in the valley. And I patched up more than my fair share of men during the war. Which side? Josephine asked, her voice carefully neutral. Confederate, Wade answered honestly. Though I can't say I was fighting for a cause I believed in, just did what my pa expected of his oldest son. Josephine nodded, understanding passing between them. My husband fought for the Union, he didn't come home. Wade finished bandaging her side in silence, respecting the weight of her words. I'm sorry for your loss, he finally said. Don't be, Josephine replied, a hardness entering her voice. William Wells was not the man I thought I married. Before Wade could respond, Lily stirred in her makeshift bed, drawing Josephine's attention. The tenderness that replaced the bitterness in her eyes, as she looked at her daughter, told Wade all he needed to know. Whatever had led Josephine Wells to be half buried in snow with a bullet wound and an infant. Her love for her child was real and deep. You need rest, Wade said, helping Josephine to his bed. Take this, I'll sleep by the fire. I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Wade insisted. You're injured and you need to regain your strength for that little one. Exhaustion won out over propriety, and Josephine allowed herself to be tucked into Wade's bed. She was asleep almost instantly, her breathing deep and even. Wade checked on Lily once more before settling himself on a buffalo robe near the hearth, his rifle within arm's reach. Outside, the storm raged, snow piling against the cabin walls and wind howling through the pine trees. But inside, for the first time in years, Wade's cabin felt like something more than just a shelter. It felt almost like a home. Morning brought a lull in the storm and a different kind of chaos. Lily woke at dawn, hungry and displeased with her accommodations. Her cries roused Wade from a fitful sleep by the now cold fireplace. Josephine stirred as well, attempting to sit up before gasping in pain. Stay put, Wade instructed, already moving to retrieve the infant. I'll bring her to you. He carefully lifted Lily from her crate, surprised by how natural it felt to hold her small form. Her eyes, he noticed, were the same striking blue as her mother's. Good morning, little miss, he murmured, carrying her to Josephine. Demanding breakfast already, I see. Josephine accepted her daughter with a tired smile. She's always been an early riser. While Josephine nursed Lily, a process that involved more of the goat's milk, and the cloth contraption they'd devised the night before Wade rekindled the fire and began preparing a simple breakfast of cornmeal porridge. His provisions were meager. He hadn't expected to be feeding 3 mouths through the winter. I'll need to make a run to town soon, Wade commented, more to himself than to Josephine. We're going to need supplies if you're both staying through the winter. Josephine looked up sharply. We can't impose on you like that. Once the storm passes, and where will you go? Wade interrupted, fixing her with a steady gaze. Begging your pardon, madam, but you've got a bullet wound, a baby, and winter's just getting started. The nearest town is Laramie, nearly 30 miles east. You wouldn't make it 5 miles in this snow. Josephine's shoulders slumped. I don't have any money to pay you for your trouble. Didn't ask for any, Wade replied simply. Besides, it's nice having some company for a change. Gets mighty quiet up here. The truth was, Wade had been alone for so long that the presence of Josephine and Lily, despite the complications they brought, filled a void he hadn't fully acknowledged. After the war, after losing his family's ranch and watching his younger brother succumb to consumption, Wade had retreated from the world, seeking solitude in the wilderness. But solitude, he was beginning to realize, wasn't the same as peace. Over the next few days, a routine of sorts developed. Josephine's strength returned gradually, though she remained weak and feverish at times, concerning Wade. Lily proved to be a surprisingly cheerful baby, given the circumstances, content to watch Wade go about his chores from her potato crate, which he'd lined with soft rabbit furs. On the 4th day, when the sky cleared and the sun emerged to cast diamond-like sparkles across the snow, Wade prepared to make the journey to Laramie for supplies. I should be back by nightfall tomorrow, he told Josephine, who sat wrapped in blankets by the fire, Lily sleeping against her chest. There's enough firewood stacked by the door to last and food in the pantry. Josephine nodded, though Wade noticed the fear that flickered across her face. What if they come while you're gone? It was the first time she directly referenced whoever had shot her and driven her into the wilderness with her infant. No one knows you're here, Wade assured her. And even if they were looking, they'd assume no one could survive that storm. You're safe. Josephine didn't look convinced. Wade, there's something I should tell you when I get back, he interrupted gently. Save your strength. I'll bring back proper food for Lily and medicine for your side. Before she could protest further, Wade donned his coat and hat, checked his rifle, and headed out into the crisp morning air. Drifter, rested and eager, pranced in the snow as Wade saddled him. Just you and me again, boy, Wade murmured to the horse. For a little while anyway. The journey to Laramie was arduous but uneventful. The snow had drifted in places to nearly Drifter's chest, forcing Wade to dismount and lead the horse through the deepest sections. By mid-afternoon, the town came into view, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the railroad tracks, with the imposing structure of the territorial prison visible on the outskirts. Wade's first stop was the general store, where he purchased flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, beans, and most importantly, condensed milk for Lily. He also acquired cloth diapers, a small tin bathtub, and a rattle made of carved wood that caught his eye. The shopkeeper, a portly man named Barnaby, raised his eyebrows at Wade's unusual purchases. Taking up housekeeping, Tucker? He asked, wrapping the items in brown paper. Just stocking up, Wade replied noncommittally. Winter's going to be a long one. His next stop was the doctor's office, where he obtained laudanum for Josephine's pain and salve for her wound. Dr. Reynolds, a graying man with spectacles perched on his nose, asked fewer questions than Barnaby, but gave Wade a knowing look. Whoever you're doctoring, bring them in if the wound shows any signs of infection, the physician advised. Red streaks, unusual discharge, increased pain. Wade nodded his thanks and added the medicines to his saddlebags. He was just about to mount Drifter for the return journey when a notice tacked to the town's bulletin board caught his eye. It was a wanted poster, the ink still fresh. Wanted. Josephine Wells for the murder of Judge William Wells. Reward. $500. Beneath the bold lettering was a sketch of Josephine, not a perfect likeness but recognizable enough. Wade's blood ran cold. The woman sheltering in his cabin, the mother cradling her infant daughter, was wanted for murder. For a moment, Wade considered approaching the sheriff's office. $500 was more money than he'd seen in years, enough to see him through several harsh winters or even to start rebuilding what he'd lost. But then he thought of Lily, her tiny hands and trusting eyes. Whatever Josephine had done, her daughter was innocent. Making a split-second decision, Wade tore the poster from the board, crumpled it, and shoved it into his pocket. He would hear Josephine's side of the story before passing judgment. After all, he knew better than most that justice and the law weren't always aligned. The return journey to the cabin was slower, Drifter weighed down with supplies and Wade's mind heavy with questions. Night had fallen by the time he crested the final ridge, and he was relieved to see smoke still rising from the chimney. As he approached, however, he noticed something amidst the cabin door stood slightly ajar, snow drifting onto the threshold. Wade drew his rifle, approaching cautiously. "Josephine," he called, pushing the door open wider with the barrel of his gun. The scene inside made his heart stutter. The cabin had been ransacked, his few possessions scattered, the table overturned. Josephine sat in the corner, Lily clutched tightly to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. "Wade," she gasped, relief flooding her features. "I thought you were them coming back. Who?" Wade demanded, quickly securing the door behind him. "Who was here?" "Men," Josephine whispered, her voice trembling. "Two of them. They said they were passing trappers seeking shelter, but I recognized one of them. He worked for William. They're looking for me." Wade set down his rifle and knelt beside her, checking both her and Lily for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" Josephine shook her head. "I hid under the bed when I heard them approaching. They searched the cabin but didn't find us. They took some of your food and left, but they'll be back." They know someone lives here. Wade pulled the crumpled wanted poster from his pocket and smoothed it out, holding it where Josephine could see. Is this why they're after you? Josephine's face drained of what little color it had. Where did you get that? It was posted in Laramie, Wade replied evenly. Did you kill your husband, Josephine? Tears filled her eyes. Yes, but it wasn't murder, it was self-defense. Wade remained silent, waiting for her to continue. William was a respected judge in Denver, Josephine began, her voice barely above a whisper. To the public, he was a pillar of the community, devoted to justice. Behind closed doors, he was cruel. After Lily was born, his behavior worsened. He claimed she wasn't his child, though I had never been unfaithful. He began drinking heavily, and when he drank, he became violent. She shifted Lily to her other arm, the infant mercifully asleep despite the tension in the room. 3 weeks ago, he came home in a rage. I don't even know what triggered it. He said he was going to take Lily away, that I would never see her again. When I tried to stop him, he drew his gun. We struggled and the gun went off. Josephine's voice broke. I didn't mean to kill him. I just couldn't let him take my baby. So you ran, Wade concluded. Josephine nodded. His brother is the district attorney. He never believed William was capable of violence. He's the one who issued the warrant, who sent men after me. One of them caught up with me in the foothills. That's how I was shot. I managed to escape in the storm, but I knew I couldn't go much farther with Lily. And then you found us. Wade sat back on his heels, processing her story. He had seen enough of the world to know that respected men often harbored dark secrets, that justice was a luxury afforded to those with power and influence. And he had seen the genuine love Josephine had for her daughter, a love that had driven her into the wilderness in the dead of winter rather than be separated from her child. I'll leave tomorrow, Josephine said into the silence. I've put you in enough danger already. No, Wade replied firmly. Those men will be watching for you. You wouldn't make it to the next settlement. He ran a hand through his hair, thinking quickly. You'll stay here. We'll lay low through winter. Come spring, when the pass is clear, we can consider our options. Our options. Josephine repeated, a hint of hope in her voice. I'm not turning you in if that's what you're worried about, Wade assured her. And I'm not letting you face this alone. You and Lily are under my protection now. The relief that washed over Josephine's face was quickly replaced by concern. But what about the men who were here? They'll return with others. Let them, Wade said grimly, rising to his feet and beginning to right the overturned furniture. They'll find a man living alone in a cabin, no sign of a woman or child. His mind was already racing ahead, planning. We'll need to construct a hiding place for you and Lily. Somewhere secure, in case they come back while I'm hunting or tending to the animals. Josephine watched him with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Why would you do this for us? You barely know me. Wade paused in his work, considering the question. Why indeed was he risking his life for this woman and her child? Perhaps it was because, for the first time since the war, he had found a purpose beyond mere survival. Or perhaps it was something in Josephine's eyes, a strength and vulnerability that called to something deep within him. Let's just say I understand what it's like to be on the wrong side of so-called justice, he finally answered. Now, let's get this place back in order. And then we'll need to talk about how to keep you both safe through winter. That night, after the cabin had been restored and a simple meal prepared from the supplies Wade had brought back, a new understanding existed between them. They were no longer merely strangers thrown together by circumstance, but allies against a common threat. As January gave way to February, Wade set about implementing his plan to protect Josephine and Lily. His first priority was creating a secure hiding place. Using the natural formation of the cabin and the rocky outcropping against which it was built, Wade excavated a small chamber beneath the floorboards, accessible only through a trapdoor hidden under his bed. It's not comfortable, he apologized as he showed Josephine the cramped space lit by a single tallow candle. But it will keep you and Lily hidden if anyone comes calling. Josephine touched his arm, her fingers lingering. You've done more than anyone could ask, thank you. The weather remained brutal, snow piling higher around the cabin with each passing storm. But inside, a different kind of warmth began to grow. Wade found himself looking forward to evenings by the fire, Lily cooing on a bearskin rug while he and Josephine shared stories of their lives before fate had thrown them together. He learned that Josephine had been raised in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher who had instilled in her a love of literature. She had met William Wells at a social function in 1869, shortly after he had been appointed to the bench. He had seemed charming, sophisticated, everything a young woman might want in a husband. "I was naive," Josephine admitted one evening as she mended one of Wade's shirts. Her wound had healed enough that she could now move about the cabin with relative ease. "I saw what I wanted to see." By the time I realized my mistake, we were already married and living in Denver, far from my family and friends. Wade, in turn, shared tales of his childhood in Texas, of cattle drives and open skies. He spoke of his brother, Matthew, who had had a gift for breaking the wildest horses and could charm birds from trees with his whistling. He even found himself telling Josephine about the war stories he had never shared with another soul. "I killed men," he confessed one night, his voice low so as not to wake Lily, who slept peacefully in her crate, now lined with soft fabrics Wade had brought from town. "Not because I believed in the cause, but because they were shooting at me and I wanted to live. Sometimes I wonder if I deserved to, when so many better men didn't." Josephine's hand found his across the table. "The fact that you ask that question shows the kind of man you are, Wade Tucker." Their physical proximity in the small cabin led to an inevitable intimacy, though both were careful to maintain proper boundaries. Wade still slept by the fire, leaving his bed for Josephine and Lily. But there were moments a brush of hands as they prepared meals together, a shared laugh as Lily discovered her toes when Wade felt a connection deepening between them, something tender and fragile taking root. February brought a brief thaw, allowing Wade to venture into the woods for fresh game. He returned with a young deer slung across Drifter's back, providing them with meat for several weeks. Josephine proved adept at preserving the venison, smoking strips over the fire and rendering the fat for candles and soap. "You're quite the frontier woman for someone raised in Boston," Wade observed as Josephine expertly skinned a rabbit he had snared. She smiled, a sight that had become more frequent as the weeks passed. "Necessity is a powerful teacher, and I've had an excellent guide." Their peaceful routine was shattered in early March, when the sound of approaching horses sent Josephine and Lily scrambling for the hidden chamber beneath the floorboards. Wade had just enough time to ensure they were securely concealed before there was a pounding at his door. 3 men stood outside the same trappers who had searched his cabin in his absence, now accompanied by a third man whose fine coat and polished boots marked him as out of place in the wilderness. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Wade asked, deliberately blocking the doorway, his rifle casually but visibly propped against the frame. "Mr. Tucker, I presume," the well-dressed man said, his voice cultured but cold. "I am Theodore Wells, District Attorney for the Colorado Territory. I believe you may be harboring a fugitive, my sister-in-law, Josephine Wells." Wade's expression remained impassive. "I live alone. My men tell me they found evidence of a woman and child staying here when they passed through last month," Wells countered. "A child's clothing, a woman's handkerchief. Your men broke into my home and stole my supplies," Wade corrected him. "Whatever they claimed to have found was either their imagination or their justification for theft." Theodore Wells' eyes narrowed. "You understand that aiding a fugitive is a serious offense. So is breaking and entering," Wade replied evenly. "And as I said, I live alone. You're welcome to search my cabin if you don't believe me, though I'd appreciate a warrant next time." The district attorney hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded to his men, who pushed past Wade into the small cabin. Wade stood calmly by the door, his heart pounding but his exterior composed as the men overturned his meager possessions once again. "There's no one here," one of the trappers finally reported. "No sign of a woman or baby." Theodore Wells' face tightened with frustration. "If you encounter Josephine Wells, Mr. Tucker, I expect you to notify the authorities immediately." She is dangerous, a murderess who killed my brother in cold blood. If I see any murderesses in these parts, you'll be the first to know, Wade promised, his tone deliberately light. After the unwelcome visitors had departed, Wade waited a full hour before moving his bed and opening the trapdoor. Josephine emerged, pale and shaking, with Lily clutched to her chest. "That was him," she whispered. "Theodore, he'll never stop looking for me." Wade helped her to a chair, pouring her a cup of the strong coffee he'd brewed. "He might never stop looking, but he won't find you, not here." "You lied for us," Josephine said, her eyes meeting his. "You could have claimed the reward, ended your financial worries." "Some things are worth more than money," Wade replied simply. That night, as a late winter storm battered the cabin, Josephine asked Wade to share his bed rather than sleep by the fire. "Just for warmth," she clarified, a blush coloring her cheeks. "It's too cold for you to be on the floor." Wade hesitated, acutely aware of the impropriety despite their isolated circumstances. "Josephine, I don't want to compromise your reputation." A sad smile touched her lips. "My reputation? I'm a wanted woman with a child, living unchaperoned with a man who is not my husband. I think propriety is the least of our concerns." Despite her logical argument, Wade maintained a respectful distance as they lay side by side, Lily sleeping peacefully in her crate beside the bed. But in the deepest part of the night, when the wind howled like lost souls around the cabin eaves, Josephine's hand found his beneath the blankets. "I'm scared, Wade," she admitted in the darkness. "Not just of being caught, but of what happens when spring comes. Where will Lily and I go?" "How will we survive?" Wade squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to go anywhere. You could stay here, with me." The words hung between them, laden with meaning. Josephine turned to face him, her features barely visible in the dim glow from the banked fire. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Wade swallowed hard, suddenly acutely aware of his rough appearance, his calloused hands, his simple way of life. What could he possibly offer a woman like Josephine? "I'm saying that these past weeks, having you and Lily here, have made this cabin feel like a home for the first time," he confessed. "I know I'm not much, just a cowboy with a small piece of land, but I would protect you both with my life. And in time, perhaps. Perhaps you could come to care for me as I'm coming to care for you." Josephine was silent for so long that Wade began to regret his words. Then, in the darkness, he felt her shift closer, her head coming to rest against his shoulder. "I already do care for you, Wade Tucker," she murmured. "More than I thought possible after everything that happened with William. But there's still a price on my head. I can't ask you to live that way, always looking over your shoulder, always afraid." "We'll find a way," Wade promised, daring to wrap his arm around her shoulders. "Come spring, I'll build us a proper home, one with separate rooms for propriety's sake, until whatever may come between us. We'll plant a garden for fresh vegetables, maybe get a milk cow for Lily, and we'll figure out how to clear your name." Josephine's soft laugh warmed his chest. "You make it sound so simple." "Not simple," Wade corrected, "but possible. We just need to take it one day at a time." As March yielded to April, the snow began to recede, revealing patches of earth that had lain dormant through the long winter. Wade set to work on his promise, felling trees and preparing logs for a new, larger cabin. Josephine helped where she could, Lily strapped to her back in a sling Wade had fashioned from an old shirt. The baby was growing rapidly, now able to sit up on her own and reaching for objects with deliberate movements. Her laughter, when Wade made silly faces at her or tossed her gently in the air, had become his favorite sound in the world. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the newly exposed meadow in hues of gold and pink, Josephine broached a subject they had both been avoiding. "Theodore won't give up," she said quietly. "As long as there's a warrant for my arrest, Lily and I will never truly be free." Wade nodded, having come to the same conclusion. "I've been thinking about that. I believe you when you say William's death was self-defense, but we need evidence, something to convince a judge or jury." "The only witnesses to his cruelty were the household staff," Josephine sighed. "And they were all loyal to William and his family." Wade was silent for a moment, turning an idea over in his mind. What about William's personal papers? A man like that, with secrets to hide, he must have kept records, correspondence. Josephine's eyes widened. His study. He kept everything locked in his desk: letters, journals, accounts. He was meticulous about his records. And where are those papers now? Presumably still in his house in Denver, Josephine replied. Unless Theodore has moved them. Wade nodded slowly, a plan forming. Then that's where we need to go, once the passes are clear enough for travel. Wade, no, Josephine protested. Denver is the last place I should go. I'd be recognized immediately. Not if we're careful, Wade insisted. We'll go together. I have a friend in Denver, a former cavalry officer who owns a boarding house near the rail yards. He owes me a favor. We can stay with him while we figure out how to access William's papers. Josephine looked skeptical. And what about Lily? I won't leave her behind, and I can't put her at risk. We'll bring her with us, Wade said. A family traveling together draws less attention than a lone woman or man. We'll pose as a married couple visiting relatives. The word married hung in the air between them. They had grown closer over the winter months, their initial wariness giving way to genuine affection and, increasingly, to something deeper. They had shared the same bed for warmth since that stormy night, though always chastely, separated by blankets and propriety. You've thought this through, Josephine observed, studying his face in the fading light. I have, Wade admitted. I want you to be free, Josephine, you and Lily both. Free to choose your own path, whether that's here with me or somewhere else entirely. Josephine reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. You know my choice, Wade. If I were free, I would stay here with you in a heartbeat. Wade's pulse quickened at her words. Then we'll make it happen, together. The next few weeks were consumed with preparations both for their journey to Denver and for the new cabin. Wade worked from dawn till dusk, fitting logs together for the walls of what would be a two-room structure with a proper stone chimney. Josephine planted a small garden, using seeds Wade had acquired during his last trip to Laramie. By mid-May, the foundation and lower walls of the new cabin were complete, and the mountain passes were finally clear enough for travel. Wade stared at their handiwork with pride as he and Josephine prepared for their departure. We'll finish it when we return, he promised, running his hand along the smooth-hewn logs. A proper home for all of us. Their journey to Denver was arduous but uneventful. They traveled by horseback to Laramie, then boarded a train bound for the Colorado Territory. Lily, now 7 months old, proved to be a good traveler, charming their fellow passengers with her bright eyes and ready smile. To complete their disguise as a family, Wade had purchased simple gold bands in Laramie. Though their marriage was merely a ruse for their safety, Josephine's hand trembled slightly as Wade slipped the ring onto her finger in the privacy of their train compartment. For appearance's sake, he murmured, though his eyes conveyed deeper feelings. For now, Josephine replied softly, her gaze holding promises for the future. Denver in late May was bustling with activity, a far cry from their isolated existence in the Wyoming wilderness. Wade felt out of place among the city dwellers in their fine clothes, but Josephine moved with the easy confidence of someone returning to familiar territory, albeit cautiously. Wade's friend, James Harrington, welcomed them to his boarding house without questions, though his sharp eyes missed nothing. A veteran of both the Mexican-American War and the Civil War, James had learned when to speak and when to remain silent. The room at the back of the house is yours for as long as you need it, he told Wade, leading them through the tidy establishment. Private entrance, no questions asked. I'm obliged to you, James, Wade said sincerely. This is a debt I won't forget. James waved away his gratitude. You saved my life at Shiloh. This is hardly repayment. That evening, after settling into their room and putting Lily to bed in a cradle James had provided, Wade and Josephine discussed their strategy. William's house is in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, Josephine explained, keeping her voice low. It's a large brick residence with white columns. Theodore has likely taken up residence there as William's heir. Is there a way in besides the main entrance? Wade asked, his mind working through the logistics. Josephine nodded. There's a servant's entrance at the back, and William's study has French doors leading to the garden. He often left them unlocked when he worked late into the night. When would the house be empty? Theodore keeps the same schedule William did: court during the day, social engagements most evenings, Josephine replied. The household staff leaves by 7 except for the housekeeper who lives in. Wade considered this information. Tomorrow is Sunday. Would Theodore attend church? Without fail, Josephine confirmed. He's even more concerned with appearances than William was. He'll be at First Presbyterian at 10 and the service lasts until noon. Then that's our window, Wade decided. We'll go to the house while he's at church. You'll guide me to the study and we'll find what we need. Josephine bit her lip nervously. And if we're caught, Wade took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band she wore. We won't be, but if anything happens, you take Lily and run. I'll handle Theodore. I won't leave you, Josephine insisted, her blue eyes fierce with determination. Wade touched her cheek gently. You have to think of Lily first. Promise me, Josephine. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded reluctantly. I promise, but it won't come to that. It can't. The following morning dawned clear and bright. Wade and Josephine left Lily in the care of James's wife, Martha, a kindly woman who had raised 5 children of her own and took to the infant immediately. She'll be safe with me, Martha assured them. You attend to your business without worry. Dressed in their Sunday best, Josephine in a borrowed dress and bonnet that shadowed her face, Wade uncomfortable in a suit James had lent him, they made their way across Denver to the Wells residence. From across the street, they watched as Theodore Wells emerged from the imposing brick house, dressed in a fine suit, his silver-streaked hair gleaming in the sunlight. He climbed into a waiting carriage which promptly pulled away. Now, Wade murmured, offering Josephine his arm. They approached the house casually, as if they belonged there, circling around to the back garden where mature trees provided cover from curious eyes. The French doors to William's study stood as Josephine had described them, elegant glass panels set in wooden frames, overlooking a well-maintained garden. They're locked, Josephine whispered, trying the handle. Wade produced a slender piece of metal from his pocket. James thought they might be. He provided this. With careful movements, Wade worked the makeshift lockpick into the keyhole, manipulating it until they heard a satisfying click. The door swung open silently, revealing a handsome room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive mahogany desk. The papers will be in his desk, Josephine said, crossing to the imposing piece of furniture. The right-hand drawer has a false bottom. Wade kept watch by the door as Josephine searched the desk. The drawer she indicated was locked, but a letter opener from the desk's surface made quick work of that obstacle. Inside, they found neatly arranged folders and a leather-bound journal. This is it, Josephine breathed, lifting the journal. William recorded everything: his thoughts, his dealings, his rages. She flipped through the pages, her face growing pale as she scanned the entries. Here the night he attacked me. He admits it, Wade. He writes that he threatened to take Lily, that he drew his gun when I refused to let him. Wade moved to her side, reading over her shoulder. The elegant handwriting detailed a cold, calculated cruelty that made his stomach turn. William Wells had not only abused his wife, but had apparently been involved in various corrupt dealings, using his position as judge to enrich himself and damage his enemies. There's more, Josephine said, her voice shaking. Correspondence with men he ruled in favor of, receipts for bribes. Theodore must know about this. They worked together on many cases. Take it all, Wade instructed. Every piece of evidence. We'll need to get this to someone who can help someone not under Theodore's influence. Josephine was gathering the papers when they heard the front door of the house open and close. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, approaching the study. Hide, Wade hissed, pushing Josephine toward a heavy curtain by the window. She had barely concealed herself when the study door opened, revealing Theodore Wells. His eyes widened at the sight of Wade standing by his brother's desk. What is the meaning of this? He demanded, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket. You're trespassing in my home, mister. Wells, Wade acknowledged calmly, though his heart raced. I apologize for the intrusion. I was hoping to speak with you about your brother's case. Theodore's eyes narrowed. My brother's murder, you mean, committed by the woman you're harboring? I live alone, Wade repeated his earlier claim. But I've heard about the case, and I have reason to believe your brother's death wasn't as straightforward as it seems. You know nothing about it, Theodore snapped. Now, I suggest you leave before I summon the authorities. Wade spread his hands in a placating gesture. I'll go. But you might want to consider whether your brother's private papers might contain information you wouldn't want made public, information about his business dealings, and yours. Theodore's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening me? Not at all, Wade replied smoothly. Just suggesting that sometimes the truth is more complicated than it first appears, and justice is better served when all the facts are known. For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other across the study. Then, slowly, Theodore lowered his hand from his pocket. What do you want? He asked, his voice tight. Drop the charges against Josephine Wells, Wade stated simply. Acknowledge publicly that your brother's death was self-defense during a domestic altercation. Theodore laughed harshly. And tarnish my brother's reputation? Never. Then be prepared for his journal and correspondence to become public, Wade countered. I wonder how the territorial governor would react to evidence of judicial corruption, or how your political aspirations would fare. The blood drained from Theodore's face. You're bluffing. You don't have anything. In response, Wade reached into his jacket and withdrew a single folded page, one of the receipts Josephine had found, showing a substantial payment from a mining company to Judge Wells shortly before he ruled in their favor in a land dispute. This is just a sample, Wade said quietly. There's much more. Theodore sank into a chair, his composure cracking. William was a fool, he muttered. I told him to destroy those records. Then you knew, Wade pressed, about his corruption, about his treatment of his wife. Theodore's silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, Wade continued, emboldened by the man's evident distress. You're going to issue a statement clearing Josephine Wells of all charges, citing new evidence of self-defense. You're going to ensure that custody of Lily remains solely with her mother, and you're going to do it by the end of the week. And if I refuse, Theodore challenged, though his voice lacked conviction, then every newspaper in Colorado Territory will receive copies of your brother's most interesting writings, Wade promised, along with sworn testimony about his violent behavior toward his wife. The standoff lasted several more minutes, with Theodore attempting to negotiate and Wade standing firm. Finally, the district attorney capitulated. I'll need time to draft the necessary documents, he said stiffly, and to prepare a statement that preserves at least some of my brother's dignity. 3 days, Wade allowed. I'll return on Wednesday for the papers, and Mr. Wells, if you attempt to renege on our agreement or cause any harm to come to Josephine or her child, the consequences will be swift and public. With that, Wade departed through the French doors, circling around to the street where Josephine, having slipped out during the confrontation, waited anxiously. Did he agree? She asked as soon as they were safely away from the house. Wade nodded, taking her hand. You'll be free by Wednesday. Legally free? Tears welled in Josephine's eyes. I can hardly believe it. After all this time, to finally be able to live without fear. Wade squeezed her hand gently. Believe it. You and Lily have a future now, whatever you choose it to be. The next 3 days passed slowly, tension building as they waited to see if Theodore would honor his agreement. Wade made discreet arrangements through James to have copies of William's most damning papers delivered to the offices of the Rocky Mountain News if Theodore failed to provide the promised documents. On Wednesday morning, Wade returned alone to the Wells residence. Theodore met him in the study, his face a mask of controlled resentment as he handed over a leather portfolio. It's done, he said curtly. The charges have been dropped. A statement has been issued to the press citing new evidence that supports Josephine's claim of self-defense. Lily's guardianship is legally established with her mother. You have what you wanted. Wade examined the documents carefully, ensuring everything was in order. Thank you for seeing reason, Mr. Wells. Theodore's eyes flashed with barely suppressed fury. Don't thank me. Just ensure those papers never see the light of day. As long as you uphold your end of the bargain, they won't, Wade promised, but they'll remain in safekeeping as insurance against any change of heart on your part. With the legal documents secured, Wade returned to the boarding house where Josephine waited anxiously with Lily. When he showed her the papers, she broke down in tears of relief and joy. "It's over," she whispered, clutching the documents to her chest. "We're free." Wade knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Yes, you are, free to go wherever you wish, to build whatever life you choose." Josephine's tear-streaked face softened as she gazed at him. "I've already chosen, Wade. If you'll still have us, Lily and I want to go home to Wyoming to you." Wade's heart swelled with emotion. "I was hoping you'd say that." They remained in Denver only long enough to have their marriage made legitimate by a justice of the peace, with James and Martha serving as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, but as Wade slipped the gold band onto Josephine's finger for the second time, this time as a true symbol of their commitment, he felt a sense of rightness that had eluded him since long before the war. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again," Josephine confessed that night as they lay together as husband and wife for the first time. "After William, I believed that part of my life was over." Wade drew her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I never thought I'd find it at all. I was content with my solitude until a certain stubborn woman and her daughter crashed into my life." Josephine laughed softly, her breath warm against his chest. "Crashed is the right word. We weren't in the best shape when you found us." "You were the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen," Wade countered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Even half frozen and buried in snow." Their return journey to Wyoming was filled with plans and dreams for their future. Wade described the additions he wanted to make to the new cabin: a proper bedroom for Lily as she grew, a kitchen garden where Josephine could grow herbs and vegetables, a stable for Drifter and the milk cow he intended to purchase. Josephine, in turn, spoke of establishing a small school for the children of nearby homesteaders, using the education her father had provided her. "There are at least 5 families within a day's ride," she noted, all with children who could benefit from learning to read and write. By the time they reached their mountain home in early June, the meadow was awash with wildflowers, and the partially built cabin stood waiting for their return, its sturdy log walls promising shelter and security. "Welcome home, Mrs. Tucker," Wade said, lifting Josephine from Drifter's back and setting her gently on the ground. She smiled up at him, Lily balanced on her hip. "It's good to be home, Mr. Tucker." Over the summer months, they worked together to complete their new home. Wade's skilled hands shaped the logs and raised the roof, while Josephine planted her garden and arranged their modest possessions. By August, the cabin was finished, a snug 2-room structure with a stone fireplace, glass windows ordered all the way from Cheyenne, and handcrafted furniture Wade had made from pine and aspen. They moved in on a warm evening in late summer, as golden light flooded through the western windows. Lily, now 10 months old and attempting her first wobbly steps, explored her new surroundings with wide-eyed wonder. "It's perfect," Josephine said, surveying the main room with its cheerful braided rug and sturdy table. "Better than any mansion in Denver." Wade slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "It's just the beginning. Next year I'll add another room, maybe the year after that, another." Josephine raised an eyebrow. "Just how many rooms are you planning, Wade Tucker?" He grinned, suddenly shy. "As many as we need." "I was thinking, hoping, that Lily might like a brother or sister someday, maybe more than one." Josephine's eyes softened. "I'd like that too, very much." As autumn painted the surrounding forest in shades of gold and crimson, their small family settled into a rhythm of work and companionship. Wade expanded his hunting territory, bringing home game to see them through the coming winter. Josephine preserved fruits and vegetables from her garden, filling their root cellar with stores. Lily grew stronger each day, her first words "Mama" and "Dada" bringing tears to both their eyes. Their nearest neighbors, the Andersons, lived 3 miles down the valley, a Swedish immigrant family with 4 children of their own. They visited occasionally, bringing fresh milk and cheese in exchange for Wade's help with building projects. Josephine began teaching the Anderson children their letters, laying the foundation for the school she hoped to establish. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in late October. As Wade watched the flakes drift past the window, he was reminded of that fateful January day when he had found Josephine and Lily half buried in a snowdrift. "What are you thinking about?" Josephine asked, coming to stand beside him with Lily sleeping against her shoulder. "About how different this winter will be from the last," Wade replied, wrapping his arm around her. "No hiding, no fear, just us together." Josephine leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. "I never would have believed it possible. When you found us that day, I was certain we were going to die." "And I was certain I'd always be alone," Wade countered. "Seems we were both wrong." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a pristine blanket of white. But inside their cabin, built with love and determination, the Tucker family remained warm and secure, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Wyoming wilderness they called home. By the following spring, as wildflowers once again carpeted the meadow surrounding their cabin, Josephine shared joyous news with Wade they would welcome another child when the snow fell again. His whoops of delight sent a startled Lily, now walking confidently on her own, into peals of laughter. "A brother or sister for you, little one," Wade told her, swinging her high in the air. "Another Tucker to help build our home." As he embraced his growing family, Wade silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led him to that snowdrift on a bitter January day. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive the wilderness had blossomed into a life richer than he had ever imagined possible, a life built on love, trust, and the promise of many springs to come.